The first thing I noticed was the tremor in his hand. From my place in the crowd, I could see my father, General Rostova, a man carved from granite and protocol, falter. The polished metal case he held slipped from his grasp, his fingers suddenly numb. It hit the dais with a sound like a gavel, sharp and final. His lips moved, forming a question meant only for his aid, but I could read it perfectly. She came back? His gaze swept the crowd, frantic, and for a split second, our eyes met. There was no recognition, no relief, only the pure animal shock of a man seeing a ghost. Just then, the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, clear and authoritative. Returned to active duty from a sealed special status. My father flinched, the words striking him with more force than any physical blow. He finally understood. 3 months earlier, I understood nothing but betrayal. I was in a sterile debriefing room at an air base in Germany, a world away from that parade ground. I was gaunt, alive by a thread, and watching my own memorial service play out on a secured news feed. A reporter asked about the heroic anonymous action that had stabilized the volatile border region I had just been dragged out of. It was my mission, my team, my life's work. My father stood at the Pentagon podium, the picture of solemn authority. He spoke with the practiced gravitas that turned my stomach to ice. "There are always rumors," he began. "The actions of certain personnel were, regrettably, unsanctioned." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "As for my daughter, Captain Rostova, her service record ends prior to that incident. For official purposes, it never happened. It never happened." The words echoed in the silent room. It wasn't just a lie to protect his command. It was the final entry in a ledger I'd been keeping my whole life. My intelligence work was a hobby. My successes were unbecoming. My very existence in his world was an inconvenience he had just officially erased. The newsfeed then pivoted, announcing he was slated to receive the Legion of Merit for his decisive strategic oversight during that exact time frame. He wasn't just burying me. He was building his career on top of my grave. He wasn't just lying to the press. He was engraving his name on my tombstone and calling it a monument to his own genius. To understand the reckoning that followed, you have to understand that my father buried me long before the army did. To my father, General Rostova, the world was a simple place, divided into columns of honor and disgrace. Honor was found in battlefield command, in the crisp salute of a subordinate, in the tangible weight of a medal pinned to a uniform. It was loud, public, and unambiguous. My brother David, the family's celebrated corporate lawyer, fit neatly into this worldview. His victories were argued in boardrooms and quantified in stock points, a civilian equivalent of conquering territory that my father could easily understand and applaud. I remember one dinner, just before my last deployment, where the entire evening revolved around him making partner at his firm. My father raised a glass of scotch, his voice booming with a pride I had never once heard directed at me. He saw David's achievement as a continuation of the family legacy. A different kind of command. Then he turned to me, a dismissive warmth in his eyes that was somehow more insulting than outright anger. I had tried to share my own news, that I had been selected for a highly competitive intelligence program, a career-defining moment for me. He just chuckled, waving a hand as if shooing away a fly. "Still playing with your little spy kit, Spook?" he asked, the nickname landing like a dull punch. "Just try not to embarrass the family name with your hobbies. That's all my life's work was to him. Because my victories were quiet, my battlefield was data, and my service was conducted in shadows, it was fundamentally dishonorable. It was sneaky. It wasn't the real army, and as a woman, my presence there was, to him, a source of quiet shame. His approval was a fortress I could never breach because I refused to use the approved weapons. That was one world. The other was darker, colder, and infinitely more real. It was Operation Black Fog. I was deep in hostile territory, operating under the sterile cover of cultural advisor. We were a small team, moving toward a supposed meeting with a key local asset, but something felt wrong, a cold knot tightening in my gut. The intel was good, almost too good. The ambient communications in the area, the background chatter of a living village, had gone silent. Everything was clean. For me, that silence was screaming. I got on the comms, my voice low but sharp, cutting through the relaxed chatter of the team. "The pattern is wrong," I said, my eyes scanning encrypted signal data. "Their comms discipline is too clean. This is a classic pincer formation." My commanding officer, a captain miles away in a secure base, hesitated on the line. He had the official intel, the satellite photos, the plan. I had a feeling, a pattern that existed only in my head, synthesized from 1,000 hours of analysis. "I'm calling an echo whisper abort," I stated, my authority absolute in that moment. "Repeat. Abort on my authority." The captain pushed back, demanding justification. "The asset is burned," I said, my voice dropping even lower. "We exfil now, or we die here." That was the moment I met Master Sergeant Kane, a grizzled Special Forces operator who was our team lead on the ground. He was a man who had seen more combat than my father had seen dress parades, a warrior who trusted his gut above all else. He didn't know me from anyone, but he heard the certainty in my voice. Over the radio, he simply said, "You heard her, we're out. Move." He trusted my invisible, analytical world over the visible reality in front of him. That single act of faith, that recognition from a man like him, was worth more than a lifetime of my father's hollow toasts. It was the beginning of a bond forged not by blood, but by mutual, life-saving respect. While my father was likely at a country club, laughing with other officers about the glory of old battles, I was in a dark, humming signals tent, making a quiet decision that saved a dozen lives. This was the duality I lived. At home, I was Spook, the weird, quiet daughter with a government desk job, a disappointment in a sensible suit. I was a footnote in the grand story of the Rostova family legacy. But in my real life, in the world that mattered, I was Odyssey. Odyssey was my operational call sign, the name attached to the classified reports that were briefed directly to CENTCOM. The analysis provided by Odyssey could redirect drone strikes, identify high-value targets, or halt an impending diplomatic crisis. My father saw a clerk who shuffled papers. My peers, the people who operated in that deadly space alongside me, saw a weapon. They saw an analyst whose insights were the only thing standing between them and a body bag. Living those two lives was a constant, exhausting act of translation. I would leave a world of immense, crushing responsibility and step into a home where I was treated like a child with a peculiar, unladylike hobby. For years, I fought to be seen by a man who refused to look. After he declared me a ghost, I realized I didn't need him to see me. I needed the institution he worships to see him for what he truly is. The meeting with Master Sergeant Kane took place in a worn-out diner 60 miles from the base, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and grease. He looked tired. Since my return, he'd been exiled to a dead-end post at a training depot. A clear and deliberate punishment for filing an after-action report that told the truth. A report that said I was a hero, not a ghost. He had paid a price for his integrity, and my father had made sure of it. There was a quiet loyalty between us now, forged in fire and reinforced by a shared enemy. I looked at him across the cracked vinyl booth and laid out the mission. "This isn't about revenge, Sergeant," I said, my voice low and even. This is about correcting the record. He used the system to erase me. Will use it to restore me. Cain, a man who knew the labyrinth of army bureaucracy better than anyone, nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't a fight we could win with emotion. We had to win it with procedure. He explained the weapon we would use. A beautiful, obscure little loophole in Army Regulation 608-22. It was called the Contested Citation Clause. It allows a soldier's actions to be officially reviewed if they directly impact the narrative of another service member's award. My father's Legion of Merit ceremony, a public and highly choreographed event, was the perfect battlefield. The plan was simple, elegant, and utterly inescapable. We would submit a posthumous award nomination for me. Not just any award, but the Silver Star, a high-level medal for valor in combat. The very existence of such a nomination would directly contradict my father's public story of an unsanctioned mission that never happened. The citation itself would be the kill shot. I would write it myself, detailing every critical action from Operation Black Fog, using the specific dates, operational, code words, and outcomes that linked my heroism directly to the decisive strategic oversight he was being honored for. The system he worshipped would be forced to acknowledge the truth. That night I sat at a laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision I used when tracking enemy movements. Each word was a bullet, aimed and calibrated for maximum impact. Meanwhile, Cain worked his own magic. He made quiet calls on burner phones, leveraging old favors with clerks at Human Resources, Command to ensure our submission wasn't accidentally lost in a sea of paperwork. He then made the final move, contacting a general on the promotions board, a known rival of my father's. He didn't reveal the whole plan, just enough to plant a seed of doubt, mentioning a significant discrepancy in the narrative of the general's award. The trap was set. The paperwork was a time bomb, ticking away in the heart of the Pentagon. My father believed in the chain of command, in protocol, in the public display of honor. He never imagined that I would use those very tools to chain him to the truth, in front of everyone. The parade ground at Fort Myer was a masterpiece of military precision. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of cut grass and autumn leaves. Rows of soldiers stood in formations so perfect they seemed unreal, a living testament to the order and discipline my father worshipped. I stood near the back, a ghost in a perfectly pressed uniform, hidden, in plain sight among the proud families of other service members. From the main dais, my father, General Rostova, surveyed his kingdom. He was the guest of honor, the very image of a noble warrior, and he was soaking in every moment of the adulation. His eyes scanned the crowd, the practiced gaze of a commander, and passed right over me without a flicker of recognition. To him, I was just part of the scenery. I was invisible, just as I had always been. The ceremony began, a symphony of polished brass and patriotic speeches. A 4-star general, the presiding officer, spoke at length about honor, duty, and the weight of legacy. The words felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. Then, it was time. My father was called to the podium to receive his Legion of Merit. The citation was read aloud, a carefully constructed piece of fiction filled with sanitized phrases like unflinching leadership and decisive strategic oversight. I listened to the description of his supposed heroism, and felt a profound, chilling calm. Every word was a lie, and every lie was a stone laid upon my grave. He accepted the award with a performance of deep humility. He spoke of the unseen sacrifices that command requires, his voice thick with false emotion. And then, he did the one thing I was waiting for, the one thing I knew he couldn't resist. He subtly referenced his lost daughter, painting himself as a grieving father who channeled his pain into a solemn drive to protect the nation. The irony was suffocating. He was using my memory, a memory he had personally fabricated as the final, poignant brushstroke in the masterpiece of his own legacy. The crowd was moved. I was not. In that moment, any lingering warmth inside me, any forgotten flicker of filial duty, turned to ice. As he finished his speech and turned to leave the podium, the presiding general held up a hand. "General, please remain. We have one final piece of business." A subtle shift went through the crowd. The announcer's voice returned, but this time it had a new gravity, a hard, official edge. "By special order of the Department of the Army, we have a contested citation to read into the record." A murmur rippled through the gallery. I saw my father's confident smile tighten at the edges. The announcer continued, his voice ringing with authority. "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States during Operation Black Fog, the Silver Star is awarded posthumously to Captain Eva Rostova." My name, the sound of it spoken aloud in that place, was a physical shock. The world seemed to fall silent. I saw the blood drain from my father's face, his mask of command shattering into 1,000 pieces of raw panic. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape that wasn't there. The metal case he was holding, the symbol of his great lie, slipped from his numb fingers and clattered loudly onto the stage. He leaned toward the 4-star general, his whisper a desperate hiss. "This is a mistake." The presiding officer leaned into the microphone, his voice like ice. "There is no mistake, General." The announcer's voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife. "And accepting the award, having recently been declassified and returned to active duty, her commander in the field, Captain Eva Rostova." That was my cue. A path cleared in the crowd as if by an invisible force. I stepped forward, my back straight, my steps measured and deliberate. The world narrowed to the few dozen yards between me and the dais. The press corps erupted, a flurry of flashing cameras, but I didn't see them. I only saw him. I saw the dawning, horrified understanding on his face as I walked toward him, a ghost in the flesh, coming to claim what was mine. He was trapped. Protocol, the system he had built his life upon, was now his cage. As a decorated officer and an award recipient, military courtesy demanded he stand and show respect. He rose to his feet, a puppet pulled by strings of his own making. He was forced to stand at attention for the daughter he had erased. I reached the stage, ascended the steps, and walked directly past him, refusing him even a flicker of eye contact. I stopped before the presiding 4-star general and rendered the sharpest, most perfect salute of my life. For my entire life, he had demanded my respect. In the end, military protocol demanded he give me mine. The 4-star general took the silver star from its velvet case, the metal cool and heavy. As he pinned it to my uniform, he leaned in close, his voice a low rumble meant only for me, though the hot mic caught every word. "Welcome back, Captain," he said, his eyes holding a deep, unwavering respect. "Your real story is safe now." In that moment, I felt a sense of validation so profound it almost took my breath away. It wasn't the warmth of a father's approval, I knew now I would never have that, but something far more real. It was the solid, unshakable acknowledgement of my peers, of the institution I had dedicated my life to. It was enough. It was everything. Across the stage, my father had become a statue. The ceremony continued around him, but he was no longer a part of it. He was a ghost at his own celebration, ignored by the very people whose adulation he craved. A young aide eventually materialized at his elbow, speaking a few quiet words. There was no argument, no final stand. He simply turned, a man suddenly old and stooped, and allowed himself to be escorted away from the dais, disappearing into the anonymous crowd. His career didn't end with a bang, but with a humiliating, silent retreat into irrelevance. As he vanished, a new circle formed around me. officers and soldiers, men and women I had served with, and others who only knew me by my call sign, Odyssey. They offered firm handshakes and quiet, knowing nods. Master Sergeant Kane was there, a rare, genuine smile on his face. In the midst of the formal pomp and circumstance, surrounded by my true peers, I finally felt like I was home. The 6 months that followed were a study in systematic correction. The wheels of justice in the military can be slow, but they are incredibly thorough. The Inspector General's investigation was swift and brutal, uncovering a pattern of deception that went far beyond his lies about my mission. The official findings were damning: conduct unbecoming an officer and willful misrepresentation of official record. The consequences were just as severe. He was stripped of the Legion of Merit he had tried to accept, and he was forced into retirement. Not as a celebrated hero, but at a reduced rank, a final, indelible mark of his disgrace. The legacy he had sacrificed me to protect was now permanently shattered, not by my actions, but by the weight of his own. My own legacy was just beginning. I was no longer Captain Rostova, the quiet analyst. I was now Major Rostova, the Director of Special Projects. My new office had a heavy oak door with my name on a polished brass plate. A small but powerful symbol of an identity I had earned, not inherited. My new family was the team of elite operators I now commanded, including the newly promoted Sergeant Major Kane, who stood by my side as my senior enlisted advisor. Our bond wasn't based on shared blood, but on shared missions, on competence, and on a fierce, unspoken trust. This was a family built on a foundation of mutual respect, everything my old life had lacked. Here, in the quiet, humming corridors of command, I was not invisible. I was seen. One morning, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender's name was my father's. For a moment, I just looked at it, feeling a strange detachment. There was no jolt of anger, no flicker of pain. I opened it. It was a long, rambling message, a self-pitying attempt at an apology that was really just a list of excuses. He blamed the pressure of command, the political climate, everything and everyone but himself. I read the first few lines, my expression calm, unreadable. I saw the man for what he was, small, selfish, and desperate to rewrite a history that was no longer his to control. Without finishing, I moved my cursor and calmly hit the archive button. I turned back to the large illuminated map of the world on my main screen. My focus already shifting to the next mission, the next challenge. His attempt to reclaim a piece of my peace had failed. It was no longer his to give or to take. My father taught me that a name on a monument is the ultimate legacy. I learned that the most important legacy is the story you refuse to let anyone else write for you. If you've ever had to fight for your own truth against someone who tried to silence you, share your story below. In this community, your voice is always mission critical.